going, that would be great. So hello, church family. I'm Paul. I'll be your host tonight, and welcome to our Oakland Center for Spiritual Living's Wednesday night midweek Oasis service. So what is an oasis, our Wednesday night service? We call it an oasis because it's a place where we can be together as a community to be spiritually refreshed between Sundays. Reverend Jeff introduced our Wednesday night service in the Satsang style with the intention that they all be informal, intimate, and rich. So we'll have a speaker speak on a subject for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up for that informal, intimate, and rich discussion. Our annual theme this year is Timeless Wisdom, Evolutionary Vision. And our monthly theme for May is Holy, Holy Uprising, Holy with a W, and then Holy with an H, Uprising. So if you're joining us for the first time tonight on Wednesdays, or at the center as a whole on this Wednesday night, we welcome you. We're glad you're here. I'll have something in the announcements to tell you how you can stay better connected. That'll come at the end of the program. And while you're in the service, you will be muted by our Zoom team. And that's not personal. It's just to improve the quality of our transmission. So again, I again welcome everyone. We're glad you're here to join us. Tonight we have a wonderful speaker. His name is Doug Myers. He's one of our practitioners. He's also an interfaith chaplain currently serving the Walnut Police Department. And he's going to speak tonight on revolutionary love. So with that in mind, Doug, we're going to ask you to open us in prayer right now, and then we'll launch into your conversation.
Hey.
I turn it over to you. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Paul. All right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending this evening. And so we'll just start with an opening prayer. So just simply quiet our minds and open our hearts. And I just invite you to move into that space within, that space of pure, infinite spirit, pure life, pure love. The thing itself showing up in, through, and as each one of us, as loving kindness, as peace, as joy. And I know that our time together this evening is truly blessed and holy, 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 and that we truly stand on sacred ground. And that each and every moment is a blessed, loving gift from the infinite to each and every one of us. And I also believe what is ours to do with that gift is indeed our gift to the divine. How we show up in the world today, in this moment, is truly miraculous, for we are the place where God shows up to experience life uniquely and beautifully. As the divine shows up as you and as me. And so I bless this time together, accepting that everything that you need to hear, you hear. That you simply allow your heart to be open. To just simply be. know that this time is blessed, and that we experience the love and the comfort and strength and the courage that we need in this moment. And so I simply turn this over to God with great gratitude, knowing that it is done. Amen. Ashe. And together may we anchor this by declaring, and so it is. Okay. So the topic for this evening is revolutionary love. I have 3 dogs at my house, so if you hear some barking, my apologies in advance. They sometimes can be loud. And Zion just got back from the dog park. So, what is revolutionary love? So, to me, it suggests that now is the time for us to kind of be involved in the healing that appears necessary for humanity to emerge to a greater level of consciousness. And I went back through the textbook, and I found this brief passage that Ernest Holmes wrote, where he says, "The spiral of life is upward, and evolution carries us forward, not backwards. Eternal in progressive expansion is its law, and there are no breaks in its continuity." So it seems to me that our evolution is the result of unfolding consciousness of that which already is and what needs to be realized to become fact in our everyday life. Holmes also wrote the Declaration of Principles, which you probably all know better as What We Believe. And it was in the very first issue of the Science of Mind magazine that was published back in 1927. And I apologize for my little history lesson, but I love this kind of stuff. And one of the guiding principles states that we believe that heaven is within us and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. We believe that heaven is within us and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. So, in other words, life is the process of evolving and has been through all time, and we're currently at the singular point of evolution, and there's no going back. This moment is the most evolved, I feel, that we've ever been in the collective consciousness. And going forward requires us courageously to rise up and to stretch our minds and to hold a vision of wholeness for everyone and for everything in life. I mean, as you all know, we have been through a devastating struggle for life in this past year. It was a weird 2020. And yet, this isn't anything new or different that has already happened in another time. Plagues and viruses and pandemics have occurred before this one, and unfortunately will likely occur again, as part of our struggle has been the lack of acceptance and willingness to engage in the healing. So the idea, I think, of revolutionary love is to rise up to the magnificence of who we are, to really awaken to a reality of truth, and to engage in the science that's available to us, and to realize, to truly know that we are a global community and that the healing must be collective. It has to be a collective endeavor for any and for all of us to embody. It's no longer working to be single-minded and only thinking about what's in it for me. I think if we don't care for others, then there will be no me, and we're all in this together. And so we need to work at every level to consider the wholeness of who we are. There's a book that Howard Thurman wrote called The Luminous Darkness. And I want to read you a quote from it. He writes, "A strange necessity has been laid upon me to devote my life to the central concern that transcends the walls that divide and would achieve in literal fact what is experienced as literal truth. Human life is one, and all individuals are members of one another." So his commentary in The Luminous Darkness, when he wrote it in 1965, is on what segregation did to the human soul. And I believe that his insights apply certainly today, as we're still trying to heal the wounds of our past, and certainly of those days in the 60s. And I think that Thurman bears the evil of segregation and points to the ground of hope, which will bring all humanity together. And that's the spiritual insight, and that's the hardcore of, for lack of a better word, sort of the religious experience, if you will. The science of mind is the philosophy of learning. It's a philosophy of truth. And our spiritual growth isn't simply by attending a Wednesday night oasis or attending service on Sunday morning. This teaching guides us in practice in healing our human experience, really in an evolutionary journey of consciousness. And this unconditional love is powerfully committed to a holy, holy revolutionary act that exudes grace, that exudes compassion, that exudes boldness. And I think that this teaching is also, it is revolutionary. It's been around now for almost a century, but I really do, in my heart of hearts, feel that this is a revolutionary teaching, and it's radical. It's a radical teaching that positions us really at the leading edge of global transformation. And those engage in it and walk the walk by balancing kind of the love and the law that we see in the world that works for everyone. And so we're called to a conscious social action, to rise up to our wholeness, to step out in and as our spiritual growth, to step up to the truth, and to be willing to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. There's no normal to go back to. That's in the past. Nature draws us forward to a newness, to a greater wholeness that we have to have courage for, and that we have to have faith for, and that we have to have trust in, that Spirit wants more and better for us. And going back or staying put is not spiritual growth. That's just spiritual stagnation. Holmes also wrote, faith without works is dead. So we should not only pray, we should act. each of us contributing to the best that we have to offer, and be willing to make whatever sacrifice is necessary, and not one that you make reluctantly, but one that offers for all, that has two great purposes. And I think in a human sense, certainly, there can be a little bit of selfishness with it, because I mean, we all want to we have a desire, I believe, for self-preservation. But the other is a greater sense that there can be no individual preservation without the preservation for the whole of the nation, for example, working together and praying together. A great spiritual power, an actual soul force that penetrates the whole world by bringing confidence and calm and judgment and right action, until the crisis that we're in passes. And freedom need never be ashamed of itself. Liberty never needs to bow to despair. God is always on the side of right. Remember that. God is always on the side of right. And faith will always conquer fear. Faith will always conquer fear. And revolution is defined as a fundamental change, in the way that we think about or visualize something as a change of paradigm, a paradigm shift. The revolutions in consciousness bring change not only to ourselves, but to the systems and to the institutions that shape the experience for all of us. I think that revolutionary love invites us into a way of being. It invites us to a way of thinking, a way of feeling, and acting in a way that's rooted ultimately in our love for one another. Revolutionary love is rooted in our love for one another. It is in this rising, right, of our consciousness that we rise up in revolutionary love for ourselves and for each other and for wholeness of life itself. That is the herd consciousness, if you will, that will cause the shift in our global village. I think that our philosophy is certainly rooted in changing the way that we think and changing our paradigm, right? So change your thinking, change your mind, right? It's one of the first things that you learn when you come into a center for spiritual living. And within our own lives, when we study science of mind, we see this powerful practice and this life and the life-altering changes, and how they affect us and how they affect our relationship with others. So revolution is when these great changes in paradigm and leaps into consciousness happen at a collective level. And it's through this collective consciousness that is always changing. Revolutions and these leaps in our consciousness seemingly are rare. But we keep doing the work. We keep walking the walk. We keep talking the talk. We move our feet, right? So it's prayer with action. I wanted to share with you too a declaration on revolutionary love from the founder of the Revolutionary Love Project. Her name is Valerie Kaur. She's a civil rights leader. I'm not sure, she was a lawyer. I'm not sure if she's still a practicing lawyer. She's an author. She has made award-winning films. And for her Revolutionary Love Project, they have a declaration on revolutionary love, which is not dissimilar, really, to what we believe in the science of mind. And I want to share that with you. So the first part is, we pledge to rise up in revolutionary love. We declare our love for all who are in harm's way. Refugees, immigrants, Muslims, Sikhs, Jews, queer and trans people, Black people, Indigenous people, Asian Americans, Latinx, the disabled, women and girls, working class people and poor people. We vow to see one another as brothers and sisters and siblings. Our humanity binds us together, and we vow to fight for a world where all of us can flourish. It continues. We declare love even for our opponents. We oppose all policies that threaten the rights and dignity of any person. We vow to fight not with violence or vitriol, but by challenging the cultures and institutions that promote hate. In this way, we will challenge our opponents through the ethic of love. And lastly, we declare love for ourselves. We will protect our capacity for joy. We will rise and dance. We will honor our ancestors whose bodies, breath, and blood call us to a life of courage. In their name, we choose to see this darkness not as a darkness of the tomb, but of the womb. We will breathe and push through the pain to this era to birth a new future. So I'm just going to give you a couple minutes just to kind of breathe that in, because it's a lot. So what is love? What is revolutionary love? I mean, love is more than just a feeling or an emotion. Love brings us into a relationship with ourselves, with others, and even with our perceived enemies. And through that, it brings us into powerful ways of acting for people outside of ourselves. It is through this love that we yearn to more deeply know one another. It is through that love that we are motivated, that we protect one another. It is through that love that we grieve deeply. And certainly that's been true for our center, having lost Reverend Jeff recently. And as we lose someone, it is through that same love that we are able to find our way back. And so I think that revolutionary love then is kind of when we bring the science of mind philosophy of co-creation and revolutionary leaps into consciousness together, with the teaching of oneness and of interconnectedness, the natural love that comes with that, that love, that revolutionary love, is bringing this collective change for our love for one another. And it's bold, and it asks us to act on behalf, excuse me, I take a drink. It asks us to act on behalf of ourselves, of those that we love, and even those that we have not yet learned to love. And that's always a really difficult place. And I know in certainly for myself, there have been times when I haven't been able to love someone. And so I'll have a little chat with God and say, okay, God, you know what? I'm having a real hard time now, and I do not feel that I can love this person. So I really need you to be that love for them through me, until I can get to a place, with whatever work I need to do, to break through that barrier. So it's also about recognizing where we are and being willing to ask for help if you, whether it's to the divine, whether it's to having a session with a practitioner. There are lots of support mechanisms that we can use. There was a quote from Michael Beckwith, from Agape, Reverend Dr. Michael, and he said that there is a lie that acts like a virus within the mind of humanity. And that lie is there is not enough good to go around. There's lack and there's limitation and there's just not enough. Well, the truth is that there's more than enough good to go around, that there's more than enough creative ideas, there's more than enough power, there's more than enough love, there's more than enough joy. And all of this begins to come through a mind that's aware of its own infinite nature, to its connectedness, to its beingness with the sacred. There's enough for everyone. And if you believe it, if you truly believe it, and if you can see it, and if you act from it, it will show up for you. And that's the truth. I think that the revolutionary love is probably a great work for our lives. And that same work that brings us into a state of love, which is also the expression, the experience of the divine within our lives. And every time that we act through this consciousness of revolutionary love, every time that we are moved to love ourselves enough to say, enough is enough. I love myself. I am enough. I love myself. I love you. Every time that we love another enough to protect them, to fight for their dignity, to come into a deeper relationship with their struggles and their pain, we're expressing that revolutionary love. Every time we allow the same love to bring us into a state of true wonder, into curiosity, and to, harder to do, but even with those that we may have made an enemy with, if we're conscious of it and we allow ourselves to be in that state of love, then we are at one with the divine. I want to share with you a quote from Octavia Butler. She's an African American. She's since made her transition, but she was a African American science fiction writer, and she wrote a novel called The Parable of the Sower, and it was the first of a series of books that she wrote, that was called the Earth Seed series, and it comes so within the book, the Parable of the Sower is the book of the living, and the book of the living is this fictional religious text that's created by the protagonist in the novel, whose name is Lauren, and she's like this hyper empathic teen, who admits environmental destruction and collapse, of the only home that she's known. She creates this spiritual center, this religion called Earthseed. And the basis of it is that God is change. And so this is what Olivia Butler wrote. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So once again, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And so with that, I have 4 questions for you this evening. Are you willing to change? Are you willing to be the change that you wish to see in the world? Are you ready to practice revolutionary love? And lastly, are you willing to be an ambassador of revolutionary love? And so I just want to express my love to all of you, my love to all of the inhabitants of this world. Namaste, amen, and so it is. And let's have a chat.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you very much. So if you're willing out there, you can turn on your cameras and your microphones, and let's show some appreciation for Douglas for sharing us this concept of revolutionary love with us in such a great way. Very moved. You made me go look up her website, the Revolutionary Love Project, and I put it in the chat, Doug. You can see it in there if you want to refer to it. And Sage is putting in the questions, the 4 questions that Doug is posing for us to inspire us to have a conversation about what we just heard. Miss Peggy Cotton, our lead hostess in the Zoom land, is going to be our moderator. And so if you wish to share something, you can either raise your hand on your camera like this or use your reaction button to raise your hand. That's in the bottom of your screen. So if anybody would like to start, please show yourself and tell Miss Peggy you want to start.
Deborah, did I see you move over there?
Thank you, Peggy. First of all, I want to say thank you. Doug, you are amazing and you were so powerful. And if you take a look at your chats, you will see how great you really are in terms of the presentation.
Thank you.
What I also have to say, though, is that what I loved about, okay, this is a plug for Dr. Dan, but what I loved about what you were saying is that it goes hand in hand with the foundation of everything we have been reading in terms of being in the practice of religious science. We must be open at the top, and we must be willing to absolutely let go of all isms to make this change. We are the revolutionaries we've been looking for, and I've heard that over and over again here in religious science. It is it by its own nature, we are revolutionaries because the science of mind makes you unlearn and learn again. And so my question to you is, which is really good, when you pose the 4 questions, how did you come about that? And do you see yourself as it as well?
So yeah, so the 4 questions, so I was thinking about just sort of change in general, right? And so springboarding from what Octavia wrote in her book in that last quote from the parable of the sower, and with the religious text, right, that Lauren created within that book. And so it was all about change. And so it's like, the first thing is, am I willing to change, right? And I think that everyone who's here tonight has already done that by stepping through the doors of the spiritual center, right? So regardless of what, a lot of us come from many different kinds of faith traditions in our past, and we found something new. And so that in and of itself is this revolutionary act. It's a radical act to let go of what we may have been taught for decades, right? And to step into something new and to be willing to be open to learn it, to study it. And that's one of the things that I most love, I think, about our teaching, is that it's like continuing education, right? So we have, there's so many different, and just look at our center by itself, right? So we have so many different opportunities here. So we have Sunday service, we have the Wednesday service, we have the group that you're speaking to with Dr. Dan's book, we have the diversity circle, we have the women's circle. I mean, there's like, all, there's the grief circle. So there's all sorts of ways for us, plus the classes, and even like the non-credited classes, if you will. So there's always kind of something fresh that if we're willing to step into that, we're by default, we're allowing ourselves to change our consciousness, to allow ourselves to grow our spirituality and to raise our level of consciousness. I think that for the second question, which was, I'm scanning quickly. Are you willing to be the change you wish to see in the world? So of course, I mean, I borrowed that from Brother Gandhi. We're all familiar with that. And I think that just goes hand in hand with the first part. It's like, you recognize the change, and now what am I going to do in my own life to be the change that I want to see? So if I see some kind of social injustice, am I going to be willing to step forward and say something? Am I willing to lend a hand when I see something that's not right? Am I willing to be that place of love, that place of support for people? Practicing revolutionary love is a broader thing, and I think that it's not anything that any of us should shy away from. I think it's just allowing ourselves to really kind of break through and to really okay, so I'm gonna quote my friend RuPaul. So RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love someone else? So that's the very first step, and that's an important step. So if you can't love yourself, if you can't say to yourself, I love you, then I can't say, Deborah, I love you. I have to be sure about that. And that in and of itself is a revolutionary act, right? If I truly, truly, truly believe that I love myself, then I am that conduit of love, and that then I can exude to you and beyond. And as far as being an ambassador, I think that's sort of the next piece of that, right? That you bring that wherever I am, that I'm anchored in that, and that I do my best if I'm able to recognize a situation where I'm not being in love, that I try and return to that center.
Thank you, Doug. I think this is a good stopping point to mention that Constance has her hand up.
Well, Doug, I just wanted to say that I don't know if you've seen it. There's a question in the chat. How can one practice inclusive revolutionary love when fundamental beliefs and unconscious biases don't synchronize? And I think you started to speak to that. And the other thing I want to say before you answer that is I just discovered that Octavia Butler's first 2 books in that trilogy are free if you've got on Kindle, if you've got Amazon Prime.
Cool. Thank you, Constance. Okay, that's a tough one. I think that we practice revolutionary love regardless of what's going on, because we have to be willing to take that first step. And we're not going to, there's not going to be that big shift in consciousness until we get to that herd level, right? Where there is then the big shift. And I think that all of us in New Thought certainly are working towards that. Is there a strong anchor in fundamentalism? Absolutely. Are we going to change them today? Absolutely not. But we have to be willing to continue to do the work and to know that, we're coming up on the 100-year anniversary, right, of the Science of Mind magazine, and it'll be in what, 2027. So I think that we continue to press forward. And I think, as far as unconscious bias, that too is our work to do. And that we have to be able to recognize that within ourselves, and to be willing to be the starting point, if you will, collectively. So as a movement that we're moving toward that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that's not where we're at right now. But I don't think that the two are incompatible. I think that we have to recognize that this is happening, and at the same time, there is a way for us to move forward by doing our own work, by doing our own spiritual growth, by doing our own social awareness and social justice work, and being conscious of, if something happens, and it's like, oh, wow, where did that come from? There's this old bias that's hanging out in my consciousness. What's the root of that? How do I release that? So I think, it takes work, and it takes bravery, and it takes us being vulnerable.
Dodie, you got something on your mind about this, Dodie? Oh, you're still muted.
No, I didn't really have anything. This is so interesting. I'm just in awe of what he's saying.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that comes to my mind on this topic is are you willing to change? Which is your very first question, Doug, which I think is a very compelling one, because the decision to literally put it in a question, and then to recognize that a decision must be made by me, because I find that I have to really go inside and understand what it is that I am saying when I'm saying I'm making a decision, that I have willingness, and now I am going to act on it. So I'm going to decide upon my willingness, and the willingness, if you will, being the battery charging up my actions underneath. And then I have to take the next step that says, well, if I'm willing, I have this willingness to change, where is it that I want to, or what is it that's calling me to begin this action? And that, I think, is so important to get there. there's something, for instance, I do caregiving for my mom, as for instance. My sister does not. I have willingness to do that. It's not automatic that your children have to do it. It is a choice. It's a choice. And it's a choice to change like that too. And so the love that I give my mother and the attention, and I'm sure a lot of other people have been in this situation, is revolutionary. I hold that in a way in that it has to do with just if I simplify it down to its real root, it has to do with divine love and recognition of the oneness of that's inside me, that is me, that acts as me and as me always, which is God. And so if I come from that point of view, then I know that my love in that situation is rooted in God's love. And for there is no other. It is all that there is. And so if I'm willing to do that much, then am I willing to be the change I would like to see? I'd like to see, I have to think about all the things I'd like to see about love and loving one another, and how in my own personal mind does that outpicture for me. It could be the simplest thing. Again, I try to simplify it, bring it down to a small something I can chew on. I'd love to see all teenagers, for instance, interact with the elderly people with love and compassion. And it's a learning and exchange of learning and information and all kinds of love, as opposed to fear or criticism or any of those other destructive words, the potentiality for destruction in those other words. And so I think that to bring us this, to put this attention to us about revolutionary love, I think is just so wonderful that you've been called to get my mind working in that direction. And I would love to see, one of the things I'd love to see to change in the world is I'd love to see the whole world be one great big neighborhood, that we all are family. And I'd like to see it demonstrated always. It's pie in the sky, some people would say, but if I start right now with my world, my neighbors, my people who I see at the little mom and pop shop on the corner, if I start there, somebody is going to see me do that. I may not be aware of who that is. Somebody is going to watch me and see that, and perhaps get inspired to do the same. So I'm complete, and Maureen French has got her hand up.
So Peggy, thank you for that. That's really hit me. Thank you, Doug, for your talk. It's really close to where I'm at right now in my kind of thought process as well. And what I wanted to say is, are you familiar with liberatory consciousness? And I was just exposed to it the other day. I'm definitely not like an expert on it or anything, but it almost is kind of like a structure for what you're talking about, the revolutionary love, in the sense of being able to demonstrate it in the world. It puts it into steps, and it gives action steps, behaviors, and questions, kind of like you did. So anyway, I'm curious if you know about it, and if you don't, you definitely want to look it up.
Yeah, so what is it again, Maureen, so we can put it in the chat?
Liberatory consciousness.
Can you spell it for me?
Like liberal.
Liberal.
So libera, R-A-T-O-R-Y.
Oh, thank you, Sage. Sage is
Yes.
done.
Yes, like liberation, exactly, Sage.
Got it. No,
guys, sounds like you're getting set up for another talk for us.
Yeah,
well, you know, one of the funny things, Maureen, is when I first joined Science of Mind, when I used to go to the city a lot. I was working and crossing the bridge a lot, and I used to swear like a sailor at drivers, and I would just have this kind of litany of cuss words strung together. And it was in, I don't know, it was in one of Reverend Jones' classes, and all of a sudden something like clicked in my head, and it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to come across as being a jerk to another driver for them cutting me off, then that's not what I want to be sending out into the world. And so it was funny because I really caught myself, and that was a really small little thing that I changed. And so now, okay, once in a blue moon, I'll cuss, I admit it. But for the most part, I try to be like a really polite driver and let people in, you know, even though it's like, really, you waited until now to like want to merge. But it's a whole different, but it's like a small thing, but it's like those kind of baby steps that we take that continue to kind of expand on one another as we continue to grow. And one other quick thing I wanted to mention, I started off with that quote from Holmes about the spiral. And that was one of, you know, I was thinking of like initially, although it's revolutionary, I was thinking revolution, right? So I was thinking vinyl, right? So most of us probably had records in our youth. And so how fast, you know, were you at a 78 going pretty fast, or were you at a 33 1/3 or at a 45? And with the revolution, right, of the record, if we played it a lot, you know, I'm going to use a 45, right? So you get a nick in it, and then the needle would catch. And so I think of that kind of spiral as things that we work on, and we catch it, and we're at a place. And then we continue on in our spiritual growth, and we get back to that same point, and it catches again, but our consciousness is not the same point that it was 2 or 3 or 4 revolutions prior to that. And so that, in that sense, you know, we're continually up leveling our consciousness, and are better able to recognize the points where we still may catch ourselves. So I always like that kind of a simple way to think, like, oh, really? This has come up again?
right.
I thought I had solved this. And it's like, okay, well, I guess you got a little bit more work to do.
And that's the same with race consciousness. The race consciousness, I just wanted to put that in the room. You mentioned it, and I think you're right. And that's where I think we're at now, is where us white folk are finally like getting that and seeing it in the moment and speaking up for our brothers and sisters, instead of them having to speak up and to educate the other people who aren't as connected to that consciousness yet. So yes, amen, ashe, thank you.
Sage?
This is Lita on the call.
Okay,
And I just want to say thank you to Doug. I
Thank you,
really
Lita.
appreciated hi, Doug, and everybody. I really appreciated hearing the declaration, similar to what we believe, and all that the writer embraced in terms of race and ethnicity and everything. I think it is so beautiful, and I'd like to know in which of her books would I find that particular writing.
So that actually, Lita, excuse me, Lita, that actually is on a website that's called the Revolutionary Love Project.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And Valerie Kaur is the founder of that. The last, it's Kaur is her family name. The last quote about that God has changed, that was from Octavia Butler's book, who's a science fiction writer.
Oh yes, I'm familiar with her books. Oh, thank you so much. I can look it up.
Okay.
Sage, you ready?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for this discussion. I'm so grateful that you brought Valerie Carr into the discussion and the room, and she is definitely an agent for change. A woman who really stays true to her commitment and passion of service and whatnot, like so many of us. And, you know, it's really nice to look around the room and see and recognize, right? And I really like your analogy of what you said about the record, because what came to mind for me was how plastic our brain can be when we're providing the right nutrients, and how we can get stuck in these patterns or habits or traits, characteristics that sometimes we don't even know that we're embodying, you know, without the awareness, without the oxygen that we need from meditation and practice and breathing, and, you know, a variety of surrounding yourself with the village, the community of support. There is a kind of a rigidity almost that can be had by people that have experienced trauma, stress, you know, ancestral stuff. And yeah, so this message really hits home, and it's kind of an inside out kind of message, because it feels like when we focus on love, it is a revolutionary force, and it's not always easy, and it's not always beautiful, and it's not always what we anticipate. And so unfortunately, right, and Maureen brought that up a little bit, and even Bea brought that up. But so Valerie Carr had a call to action recently. I'm familiar with her because I went to one of her events after one of the last shootings. She called everybody together to be agents for change and awareness for hate crimes, essentially. And I was so moved by the collaboration and the discussion and the capacity of presence in the light of, or in the darkness, like you said with Howard Thurman, like in the luminous darkness, in the darkness of hate, and in the darkness of you know, violence. And a lot of us have experienced things that we wouldn't necessarily call loving, and it kind of, again, it kind of creates this inward kind of a closing in, right? And then the revolutionary love is just this outpouring of continual nurturing and continual caressing of whatever it is that we are experiencing, knowing that contrast is part of that, and knowing that it's not always going to be a beautiful, fragrant bed of roses, you know, that it also encompasses, sadly, the thorns and the blood too. So yeah, thank you for bringing so much depth to this discussion, and so many levels to relate with your questions. And your references are really helpful too, because I feel like, again, it's just like this open bursting neuroplastic, all these connections happening, and that's what we're here to be, and that's what we're here to do. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sage. Yeah, it was funny, you know, I just really quickly, when I first saw the topic, so those of you that know me, and from a number of years ago at one of our very first classes for the diversity circle, I did a whole thing on racism and Broadway musicals. So I'm a huge fan of Broadway musicals. And so the very first musical I thought of when I saw this title was Les Miserables.
Mm.
And in the original, because it's about, right, the French Revolution, but I was thinking back to the original staging of that show. They actually had a turntable on the stage so that the actors, they could walk, but they could stay motionless and would be moved around the stage. And there's actually even a song after one of the first battles when they're at the barricades, and it's the women are singing a song called Turning. So there's all these references even within that show about revolution, like the revolution of the war, the revolution of the change that's taking place in the French government, the revolution of, there's certainly revolutionary love in that too, right? So there's, but there wasn't a way for me to fit it into the talk tonight. So that's my plug for Les Mis. So if you haven't listened to it recently, listen to it again. And you can certainly see the film version. It's not as good as a stage production, but it's the next best thing.
That's awesome. I will, what you reminded me too is of the Buddhist principle of just the fact that everything passes, everything changes, and how remarkable it is when we can center ourselves on the impermanence of the pain or the difficulty or whatever it is that we're experiencing, and sometimes the bittersweetness of recognizing that how remarkable it is too, that it shifts even the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Through the pain we get stronger.
Yes.
Are we complete, guys? Are we ready to move on? Is there anybody with a burning desire to share? If not, I'm going to move on again and thank Doug. Doug, I like words, and I would like to look at the deconstruct revolution and realize the root is evolve. I'm not looking this up, I'm just guessing. And then the first part is re-evolution. That's a revolution. We're evolving again. I would like to think that's what we're talking about, into a greater expansion of what we are, which we are children of God, lest we forget. And I'm going to read yesterday's thing. Deborah, don't have a fit, but from Dr. Dan, there's a sentence. And so I'm claiming a revolutionary love statement. And he says, all of God's children, I am convinced, feel instinctively in their moments of divine illumination that a life of inward rest and outward victory is their inalienable birthright. This is not something that we earn, not something that's bestowed on us if we're good. This is not something that we get because we have a card or we pay a due or whatever. It's our birthright. We are children of God. And I think we're re-establishing that through what we're going through. And I would like to thank Dr. Dan for showing us that. And that's in my announcements tonight. We meet at 12 noon through the events page, and we go through his book, Guidance for a Spiritual Journey. There's a little group, and I'm inviting you all to join us. It has really been a revolutionary love action in my life. And Deborah's shaking her head, and anybody at Peggy's a part of it. Dodie down there's Dodie and Deborah got me in on it. They dragged me, and I know what drag is, okay? So I am so glad. And Lita's a part of it, and Luis is part of it, and Dr. Judith down there's been there, and many others, and Constance. So all of you, thank you so much, because it goes back to what Sage was saying. We're a village, we're connected, and this is our job. This is our birthright, to share this kind of information and hold each other up. So that's my mini sermon. Who's coming to really preach on Sunday? As I segue into Peter, if you're ready. Next Sunday is is Jacqueline Edwards, Reverend Jacqueline Edwards, and she'll continue the theme of Holy, Holy Uprising with the talk, This Too Is God. Meditation at 10, and service starts at 10:30. And there is nobody more uprising in the Holy, Holy than next Wednesday night, and that's the fabulous Reverend Eloise Oliver. We all know her. She's come home to be with us every other month. So her Wednesday night is next Wednesday night, 6:30 as the meditation, and the service is at 7. Now, this is an important announcement on the next slide. This is all about our evolution as a center. And for the next 2 months, Reverend Sunny Cantrell Smith will be our temporary minister. And one of the services that she is bringing to us to help us, to love us up, is a listening circle. So you are all invited to a listening circle. And this is for our villagers who are not practitioners, who will have their own learning circles, or members of the Board of Trustees, which will have their own learning circles with Reverend Sunny. And it's our opportunity to be heard, and will be held in small groups of villagers. This is your time to share from your heart about Reverend Jeff's transition and all the community changes. There's that word again, Doug. The first question, are you willing to change? Community changes and challenges. Each one of these 4 groups is limited to 15 participants. Currently, there are 3 small groups scheduled, so please choose the one that best fits your needs. It's on Saturday, May 15th at 12 noon, Saturday, May 22nd at 12 noon, and in between on Thursday, May 20th at 12:30 in the afternoon, as posted there. There'll be more information in the Village News and also on our website for a complete list of the times Reverend Sunny will be speaking and offering times to gather and meet. You have to choose the one that best fits your needs, that you wish to attend, and reservations are required. And you can do that through the website. Constance will be getting that up probably in the next couple days.
No, it's already up.
Oh, did it go up? I didn't. Where is it located, Constance?
On the events page. I just got it up today.
Thank you.
And the groups are about a third to a half full. So get your mouse pointed at and click to get yourself registered.
Yeah, get on the events page of our website and look for it and reserve your seat. Carmen West Jefferson, a practitioner emeritus, is offering a 6-week book study on caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. In this brilliant book, the Pulitzer Prize winning author gives us a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomenon in America as she explores through an immersive, deeply researched narrative and stories about real people, how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human rankings. This kind of leads us to what that question was, Doug, in the chat about how can we be inclusively and revolutionary love when all these things, systemic things are going on. This will help us understand that. A study guide is included in the 6-week summer series discussion. Sign up now. I believe that's also on the events page. The studies will begin on Monday, June 7th for 6 weeks at 6:30, and it will be on Zoom. If you're waiting to be more intimate, we talked about Dr. Dan with our villagers, like Sage said. I think that's where we come to get restored in our revolution of love. Join one of the small groups. One is Dr. Dan, our noontime. That's on the events page. Or you can join Zoe, who's hosting an online small group on Thursdays at 6:30. Or you can come to the center in the courtyard in person with practitioner Susan Brecker, and Zoe's a practitioner as well. She's meeting in person in the courtyard with a small group every Tuesday from 3 to 4. So there's opportunities for us to gather digitally and physically. Doug, you have launched us onto a concept of evolutionary love. So thank you, and revolutionary love. I think we're going to, and I'm asking that you might I'm going to research what Maureen, the liberal thing, and hopefully you two will do that as well, sir. And I'd be curious to hear what you might want to formulate into a talk in the future about that. I'm very interested. I want to thank you, Doug, for your talk, your meditation tonight, the Zoom team, Peggy, Peter, Alice, and Sage in the background, and of course the wonderful Constance. I also want to remind anybody like B who is here for the first time tonight, check out everything that's going on at our website, but on the lower left-hand corner of the homepage is a place where you can submit your email address, and we'll start sending you our weekly newsletter, the Village News, which will have a week's worth of upcoming events and all the login information all in one little handy place to get and remind you of what's going on here at the center. So with that in mind, I'm grateful to know, Peter, that we have an offering. So we have an offering statement that we would like to say, and we take our digital bowl and I pass it around square to square, room to room, and collect your gift. As we say, this gift I give is God in action. Like Doug said, put your feet to it, right? So let's put our money in it, in that digital bowl, because that's what makes things go round and round here at the center. Like the electricity and the lights and the salaries and the cleaning. It does good work in the world and blesses creation. So I'm grateful for your contributions that you do. The easy way is to donate. Where else? www.oaklandcsl.org. There's a handy donate button there for your credit card, or you can text an amount and follow the prompts at 510-327-3431. Or in the middle is our address. You can drop a check in the mail. All three ways to contribute financially. We're all contributing physically and emotionally and spiritually here at the center. So I'm grateful for those gifts as well. Doug, super grateful for you being here. I know you're coming back next month, I think, for next month.
Yeah, so for Pride Month.
Pride Month.
Yeah, I'm doing, I think, around maybe the 2nd of June.
So we're going to have a lot of Doug going on. Thank you for staying with us tonight through the whole service. We're going to run over on our Wednesday nights as we talk about these rich, informal, and intimate services. And we hope you had a good time. Please come back and visit us.